which is the installation of solar panels on Newtongrange Parish Church Main Hall, Newtongrange.
Thank you, Chair. The report is with regard to planning application and listed building consent application for the installation of solar panels on Newtongrange Parish Church, Main Street, Newtongrange. The Newtongrange Parish Church is a Category C listed building. The proposed development comprises the installation of 30 solar panels on the south elevation of the roof of the church. The solar panels are set out in 2 sections of 9 panels and 2 sections of 6 panels. The panels measure 2.1 metres by 1 metre. The panels are to be mounted over the existing roof slates. In assessing the proposed development, the primary consideration is the proposed solar panels' impact on the architectural and historical character of the listed building. The assessment set out in section 8 of the report considers the development by nature of its location on a prominent roof slope detracts from the listed building, and that its design and materials conflict with the traditional slate roofing materials. There have been no representations received in relation to the applications and 1 consultation response from Newtongrange Community Council, which is in support of the applications as outlined in section 5 of the report. The recommendation is to refuse planning permission and listed building consent for the reasons set out in section 9 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions? More hands up than I want to do it. Councillor Alexander.
I would support the installation of the solar panels, given our need, our climate emergency need, and the need to rely less on fossil fuels, etc. So I would give my permission to have them installed.
Thank you. I'm now going to go onto the internet to Councillor Drummond, then Councillor Smale, and then Ellen.
Thank you. Yeah, after one, I'm really excited about what's happening at Newtongrange Church. The church is at the heart of the community, and it's been out of action, and it's been felt it's going to be a great community facility. But whilst it may seem like common sense to allow this to go ahead, it's quite understandable why the planners have turned it down, as the council policies at present do not allow them to consent. However, given the climate emergency, the green agenda and the instability within the energy sector, I would suggest some of these policies are outdated and suggest that we need to look at them and update them. So I would second that. I think it should be approved.
Thank you. Peter?
Yes, the policies we're considering here in relation to a listed building derive, my understanding is from the Scottish Government. We are obliged to follow them. And they do not, Scottish Government certainly considered the green issues, but there is no carte blanche to put up unsightly panels on a major public building, because to do so would breach our obligations to preserve in a conservation area or a listed building. Let me talk a bit about this church. Do you realise what the significance of this church is? There are 3 important buildings in Newtongrange. 2 were designed by a local architect called A. Murray Hardy. One of them is the former cinema, which has been demolished. So we're left with the Dean Tavern, and we're left with this. What's significant about it? The date, 1942. This is one of the few buildings that was completed in the Second World War. And it is almost the last Gothic revival building that I know of to be built at all. That's why it has buttresses. It is architecturally quite unique, representing the change from the arts and crafts style of architecture towards the sort of modern churches that we have, such as St. Luke's in Mayfield. I can only think of St. Columba's Cathedral in Oban, which was completed in 1939. That's comparable to that by the famous architect Sir George Gilbert Scott. So here we have one of the most important, the most important building in Newtongrange, a building that is significant to the final years of the thinking of the Gothic revival. And we are wanting to put up these huge panels. There are 4 of them which do not relate to the 3 lucarnes, which are the dormer windows. The effect of it is to spoil this treasure that we have in Midlothian, one of the most unique wartime buildings to be constructed. I don't think we can agree to this, however passionately we believe about the Green Revolution. I don't think these panels will make a material difference whatsoever to that. but they will spoil the appearance of this lovely building in Newtongrange.
Thanks, Peter. Ellen, then David, and then Brian.
I think we have to be sensible, and in today's climate of high energy costs, we've got to be a little pragmatic about things like solar panels, because although we need to preserve the buildings, we also need to have them energy efficient. And people are so used to seeing solar panels, and there are other buildings nearby in Newtongrange with solar panels on them. They've become part of the rooftops, and I think that a large part of the church project, they really need to have the solar panels being installed to make it economically viable, so that this community facility, which, as Councillor Drummond had said, is an absolutely exciting project, you know, for the middle of Newtongrange, that's had, you know, a hole in the ground since they demolished the swimming pool for many, many years. So the community is behind it, and I just would like to support the fact that these solar panels will become, you know, part of the community. And I can see that sometimes you have to actually juggle what is sensible against, you know, aesthetic values. And I think to make this into something that the Newtongrange Parish Church will have to run into the future, we need to have the solar panels.
Okay. David.
Thanks, Chair. Fascinating history. Good to know. And I totally kind of go, you know, understand Ellen and Diane's points about the need for kind of modern solutions to energy provision. But I'm not actually going to dwell on that. My concern is more, you know, point 2, that it hasn't actually been demonstrated satisfactorily that the church, you know, this listed building, old building, can actually sustain these photovoltaic panels. In 8.7, it states that nothing has been demonstrated that it can do this. The submissions include a report from a civil engineer which states that the roof should be able to hold the panels. I mean, this is a listed building. I don't think we should be, you know, if we're talking about this kind of thing, I don't think we should be working with shoulds. There should be an appropriate structural report, you know, for transparency purposes. I have a building warrant in with Midlothian Council at the moment for a very, very insubstantial piece of work, but the requirement for a structural engineer report is front and centre. There should be no exception. In fact, there should be a greater attention to a listed building in a conservation area. You know, I'm not averse to the idea of photovoltaics. I understand that, understand the future relevance of that, and agree with Councillor Drummond that perhaps, you know, if there are planning policies that need to be updated to reflect that requirement, you know, I think that's good, and Midlothian Council should move with the times. The fact is, it seems to me that the planning application is incomplete in terms of providing an appropriate structural report that would support the roof supporting these panels. And until such time as that is provided, I don't think a decision about the relevance of the photovoltaics is pertinent, really. So I think I would say motion. Did someone move? Did you move? That we follow the recommendations. I think I would second the recommendations based primarily on the requirement for an appropriate structural report, and suggest that perhaps this comes back when that's provided.
Okay, I'm just trying to keep up with the amount of hands that keep going up. I think it's Brian next and then Colin. Brian.
Yeah, very iconic building in the middle of Newtongrange on the main street. And you can see that picture of that fascia pointing to the main street on many kind of logo kind of agendas. Next to this church is this church hall, which is going to be demolished, and a good bit of development is going to take place in this area. Well worth development coming. The community were scared that this site would be demolished altogether because they want to protect the area. I think the plans for the development internally which we're not seeing here today and not discussing here today, is included with the plans for the solar panels. The solar panels are at a height which doesn't deflect, on my opinion, on the actual aesthetics, the viewing of that area. Bearing in mind that the economic development of this is wanted, and the economic development will probably include the sustainability of solar panels and also with the climate change agenda. The railings you actually see in the picture there are also protected by Historic Scotland round about the building, and I'm aware that this should be preserved. And basically, this does preserve everything, shall we say, at ground level for this area, and encourages the development of a much-needed community facility and place of worship. So I would move permission, planning permission for the solar panels.
Yeah, it's already been moved and seconded. Okay, thank you. Councillor Cassidy.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd also would like to thank Peter for his history lesson, and just point out that this church has stood since 1942. It's withstood near hurricanes the other night. It's withstood snowstorms. It's withstood everything that nature can throw at it. I don't think that these lightweight solar panels are going to really have much of an impact on the structure of this building. I'm not a structural engineer, and I'm not going to put my name in it, but I have no fear that this building will stand with these panels on the roof, so I would be happy to go and vote for it.
Okay, Councillor Drummond, I think, is next to come back in, and then I think I'll let you two fight it. Councillor Drummond.
Yeah, I just wanted to come back on something that Peter was saying about the importance of the church. As somebody who grew up in Newtongrange, who had their school ceremonies in the church, who was in the panel, went to Girls' Brigade, I'm well aware of the significance of the church to the people in Newtongrange. And like Councillor Pottinger said, there was a very real fear within the community that that wasn't going to be there, that the church was going to be taken and that there was nothing going to be left in its place. Now, given the way that Newtongrange has already been left with holes in our main street, I think that's something that needs to be considered here, is that we are happy that our church is staying and we want it to be viable and able to continue to be at the heart of our community for everybody, regardless of who you are or whatever. It's really important to the people in Newtongrange that this church is where it is, and I just like to kind of just look at the other side of that importance of that church, because it is very much something that everybody in the community has been a part of. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to take Stuart Mackenzie next, then Margot Russell next, then Douglas Bowen next, and then I'll come back to the next two hands, which I think are David and Peters.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep it brief because there's a lot of people. Yeah, I would say with regards to this is we need to think, what's the church for? And it's for the heart of the community. And I would much rather look at a church building with a solar panel on the roof that is full of people than a church building that's empty because the church themselves can no longer afford to heat it and keep it as a viable building.
Do you think it makes that much difference?
Okay, right, Margot.
Thank you, Chair. Just one question, and it's to a legal officer. That given that, according to the paper here, that there was a refusal for solar panels on a church in West Lothian, the Scottish Government refused it. What if this particular planning committee wanted to go ahead with the solar panels? What would be the next step?
I would think each application is taken in its own merit. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, Chair, if the elected members wish to grant planning permission and listed building consent, they can do, and then the church can implement them. If I got the opportunity, can I just clarify a couple of things as well, Chair? The first one is to do with just the general principle of support for renewable energy and green technologies, which this council whole country. Individuals are moving in that direction. That's important and valuable. In terms of projects like this, no one's not saying that even an old building shouldn't have the opportunity to use some renewable technologies, improve energy efficiency. Just sometimes there's a balance to be struck, and sometimes there's other options. For example, in this case, the paper discussed the possibility of whether you had freestanding solar panels in the open space that surrounds the church rather than on the church roof. So just to make the point that sometimes there is a balance to be taken, and there's alternatives to solar panels on the roofs. So it's just to bear that in mind. And the second one is just a sort of procedural thing, just to make sure the committee lines itself up correctly, is that we've got two applications here. One is for planning permission, and elected members will be more than familiar with the procedures around planning applications insofar that they're assessed against development plan policies unless material considerations indicate otherwise. So in this case, members could say that the reuse or the full use of the church, renewable energy, etc., is material consideration that outweighs the policy position in terms of the planning application. So that's good. It's a slightly different argument in terms of listed building consent applications. The legislation is different. That's based on a judgment whether you feel that the proposed development impacts the architectural, historical or cultural fabric of the building. So you're not calling on that material consideration argument. So there's a sort of almost a requirement on members to say you could reach the view that we don't think the solar panels do affect the architectural or historical character of the building. So you can still reach that decision, but just to say there is that sort of fine line to walk in terms of listed building consent applications. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you. Again, I'll be brief. Much as I love old buildings, I'm a member of the Scottish National Trust and Historic Scotland, and I regularly visit old buildings. In this case, I think it's absolutely vital that we allow this development to proceed. I'm a newcomer to Newtongrange. I've only been there 20 years, unlike Kelly. But I know the depth of feeling in the community about the church development. They're desperate for this to happen. They've already had a hole in the ground opposite for about 5 or 6 years. They've got a dilapidated library. There was hopes of a new library, but that's not happening. This is the only thing there is to cling to for the residents of Newtongrange. They're desperate for it to happen, and I really think if we turn this down and stop the panels being installed, the feeling at Newtongrange of being let down by the council is going to be huge.
Thank you. Right, Peter, then David.
Yeah, there have been a number of comments basically saying that anyone who opposes this is in favour of the demolition of the church, or it's got something to do with potholes, or it's got something to do with the demolition across the road. None of you have shown that these panels actually are critical to the survival of this church. My last knowledge of the application we had at Dalkeith Country Palace is it takes about a 9-year period for a payback on solar panels. So why you think that those who want to stop the desecration of this lovely building in Newtongrange somehow are damning the whole project to perdition? You are exaggerating. It is hyperbole, and we're not getting a quality debate. What I would suggest, and quite apart from my colleague David Virgo's sensible suggestion that we make sure this thing is structurally possible, is we should have an expert group who understand architecture report to us. That might be HES itself, it might be Scottish Civic Trust, which I used to be a member of, it might be the Architectural Historical Society of Scotland. But right just now, we're going ahead and mutilating this building without any professional advice on it, and the improper suggestion being made that if we don't do this, that somehow the church will fail, that clearly is not logical.
Thanks, Peter. David?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to revisit kind of my earlier points on reflecting on what's been said. And I respect kind of Peter's position, but I think ultimately, if it were just a consideration of point one, then I would kind of be more inclined in favour. I defer to you know, the local councillors, the understanding of the import of the church and its continued use. However, we also talked earlier in this meeting about the danger of setting precedents, and it still, I can't get past the fact that 8.7 clearly says fundamentally what Councillor Cassidy said. Their submission seems to have been, I'm not a structural engineer, but I reckon the roof will hold them. And I just don't think that's right. I'm not suggesting that we do not grant permission, full stop, end of story. I'm suggesting that they bring back the structural engineer's report that they should, and I'm trying to understand it, but as part, they said they would do that at the building warrant stage. They haven't included that in their building warrant submission, and therefore the planning authority is still not satisfied that the roof will hold it. Now that is the process, as I understand it, and if we just kind of waive that for this project, that I think is another dangerous planning precedent. And therefore, I reiterate, I'm not saying that we do not grant planning permission full stop. I'm saying that we possibly defer this until such time as we have, as the planning authority is satisfied that the building is structurally sound for these lightweight photovoltaic panels, and maybe revisit it at that point and have the discussion about the merits or not of the aesthetics of these panels.
Okay, I must mind to thank Russell for taking the day off. However, I'm now, David, sorry, but we're now, I certainly am in two separate lines here. Your colleague Peter has formally moved that we refuse consent because of the effect and detrimental effect it's going to have on the building. You're now saying what I think is a completely different thing. So I'll just wonder if, Peter, are you going to allow that?
Yeah, I think there is a commonality between David and I that this needs to come back with two key things. One is a proper assessment of the architectural impact by a qualified group, specifically advising on this, not just giving general advice, which the planning officer has very correctly brought to our attention, but also, second, it is rather cardinal to the whole project that the panels can actually be installed structurally and indeed at such a cost that they will produce some sort of economic return. But I do warn all the other members that in these cases, the return on photovoltaic panels is a very long-term thing.
Okay, so just to be clear, you're moving that we don't determine this just now, that we ask for further reports to be brought back to this committee before determining. Okay, right, I'm clear with that.
David's happy with that, I think he is.
Okay, I have that many hands that have went up. I'm lost as to who was first. So I'm going to take it round this way if you're okay with that. Peter, Brian.
Yeah, just to say, but maybe local knowledge lets me know about the whole development plan for this area, although this is not actually on the table here today. The sustainability of that development plan for this building is obviously part of the solar panels. It's included with this. The solar panels have had a lot of deliberation already with the planning department. Planning departments went through this, and they want them to have a green policy on their planning application, and they didn't want them to have solar panels. There's no alternative. You can't have both. You either have it or you didn't have it. And the solar panels on the ground would be unacceptable, in my mind, because they are high up, they are pointing to the sky, they are on the side of the building and not in the front of the building, and I think the visual impact is a lot less than many of the solar panels on the Castle Rock housing throughout Newtongrange, which is bungalows and ground level. You can see solar panels didn't really have that much of a visual effect. It's not as if they're reflecting a lot of light or anything like that. These are there as part. The building, 1942, the railings were protected because they weren't taken for the war effort. For the church, historic Scotland, the ground floor is not getting changed. Everything, the structure of the building will be the same. And I didn't like the idea of saying we're going to. I can't remember what Peter's actual word was, but the adjective, to actually destroy that building by doing this. No, we're not. they're actually, I can actually see it being improving the building and the plan. And I really do support this application for the sake of the community and moving on with this development.
Okay, can we all please keep in mind the planning manager's advice that we should be dealing with this on a planning matter and the waiting planning issues on that.
Yeah, and also the scrutiny
yeah,
now.
Brian, thank you. Willie.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I'm sympathetic to listed buildings and consent. When it comes to churches, it's more important who's inside the church than looking outside the church, Chair, for me. And here before us, in my first time as an elected member, we have a chance to do something meaningful for Newtongrange. I would propose we go ahead with it.
Stevie, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. My view is, and it's my opinion, I think Councillor Smale, who I understand his position, overstates the detrimental impact on the aesthetics that this has, and therefore I'll be voting to overturn the application. So I'm in favour of the solar panels.
Thank you. I'm just... Yep, you've actually moved the consent to this. Ellen?
Just one last thing about if it was freestanding panels. There's not a lot of room around the church now, and it is going to be used for like gala day celebrations, for community celebrations. So freestanding ones wouldn't really be ideal, and you know the possibility of getting them broken and things like that is quite real. So I think you know, going on the roof is a much more sensible approach.
Thank you. And last, and I mean not last, is Kelly Drummond, please.
I would just like to clarify that there was no point at which myself or Councillor Pottinger said that we said if they didn't have the solar panels, we said this wouldn't go ahead. That wasn't what was said. What was said is there's a very real fear of that in the community. Now, I think that as representatives of our local community, it is fair and right that we address that and say, well, this is how the community is feeling. So I just wanted to clarify that we did not say it would not go ahead like what was said. Thank you.
Right, thank you. David, can I take you very last?
Thanks, Chair. I mean, I see where it's going. I understand that. Can I just get a legal view on the precedent that we set? What is that? You know, I will echo Councillor McManus's comments here. What precedent legally are we setting as a council in overturning our own policies in terms of building warrant requirements?
And I think it was Councillor Margot Russell that made that point. Because I see Conor McManus looking a bit. Okay, Willie, do you want to make any comment on that?
Well, the Council's Planning Committee is perfectly entitled to make its own decision based on the planning merits of each case. So in terms of setting a precedent, it's very difficult to say that you're setting a precedent because every case is so fact sensitive. It would be very difficult to replicate the same or similar circumstances, but every case stands on its own merits. And in this case, the member's entitled to make a decision based on the planning merits.
Okay, so in front of us we have a motion to grant consent for the solar panels by Councillor Alexander and Councillor Drummond that clearly just state that the installation of the solar panels and the effect it has on the church hall that outweighs the policies which would prevent that, so therefore the weight being added to the benefit everything overall outweighs that. So in other words, to grant consent. So that's moved by Councillor Alexander, seconded by Councillor Kelly Drummond. On the other hand, we have an amendment, sorry, yeah, I think it's an amendment by Councillor Smale, seconded by Councillor Virgo, that further reports be brought back and this be continued for the reports to be brought back. Everybody okay with that? Okay, so the show of hands will be first for those who agree the solar panels. So those who are minded to grant consent for the solar panels, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So that's 11. 13. 12, 13, sorry, I missed the two on the screen, apologies ladies, and those to continue for further reports, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, with that, consent has been granted. Can I just add to the end of this, one of the things that was said there was, I think we often talk in here about, like say, UPVC windows and stuff like that. I think there's a dire need for this committee, along with officers, to be sitting down to review these different areas, and especially if the green agenda comes forward, because we're sitting here and officers are coming back, and I think Councillor Drummond made that point, because of the policies we've been made, but we need to also be aware, because Councillor Smale makes the point, that actually the policies, some of the policies guiding us here are Scottish Government policies, so we might want to be making contributions or connections with the Scottish Government on where we would like to be. But certainly I think we really need UPVC windows and stuff like solar panels for historic buildings, and we'll talk the last time about electric charging points in that near areas and stuff like that. So I think there's a bit of work there that we could be doing to sort of try and bring the policies that we're asking officers to deal with us, so as that officers aren't coming back here with reports and we're going, why are you coming up with that? Because the reality is they are the policies that we are guided by. So on that, could I thank you all, and I will remember to thank Councillor Russell for Russell Imrie for asking me to chair this today. Thank you.